After I switched to an all plant-based diet back in late 2010, I started noticing more about Gandhi being a vegan, and I wondered how that aspect, his dietary experiments, how those helped shape him. Last winter, I watched the 1982 Gandhi movie twice. It focused more on his fasting and his political influence. So the movie left me with a lot of questions. Gandhi was vegan for most of his 79 years. In his autobiography, he often described himself as a fruitarian. His dietary restrictions had a big impact on most of his philosophies. Gandhi was born in 1869. He was married at age 13 and was assassinated in 1948 at the age of 79. India gained its independence, well, largely a result of his efforts, in 1947. Gandhi wrote his autobiography in his late 50s, starting in 1925. He was a shy, bright, humble young guy. He traveled with the poor, served the poor. He lived in a minimalist fashion, studying all the major religions, often from jail. Gandhi was vegan for most of his 79 years. In his autobiography, he describes himself often as a fruitarian. His dietary restrictions seem to have had a huge impact on most of his philosophies. And it's interesting because I've noticed that after I transitioned my diet, my views on everything from the environment to religion and politics have shifted as well. Mrs. Cicella Bach wrote the foreword to this authorized American edition of his book. She starts with a discussion of Satyagraha, which is a campaign of civil disobedience to replace methods of violence and to be a movement based entirely upon truth. To bring about profound social and individual change without the fanaticism, the hatred, and the slaughter that attend so many struggles. Gandhi brought an entirely new dynamic into the political and social fields, transforming the history of India and the lives of all who took part in his many campaigns. By writing, he hoped to achieve a greater self-knowledge and come closer to the goal of self-realization that he equated with truth, with moral and religious insight, and with seeing God face to face. Gandhi viewed his life as experiments in truth. So, reviewing the experiments amounted to writing an autobiography. This book shapes a path to the collective resistance to injustice. Mrs. Bach summarized 3 general legacies of Gandhi. Number 1, his strong belief that all people can guide their lives according to the highest ideals, no matter how powerless or insignificant they might feel themselves to be. Our decisions and how we live matter. Number 2, Gandhi remained utterly opposed to all forms of social, ethnic, or religious intolerance. Hate the sin, not the sinner, is a precept so rarely practiced that the poison of hatred spreads in the world. Number 3, Gandhi insisted that personal change and the ability to bring about social change are linked. Begin small. Banish violence and untruth. So doing prepares the ground for the world of tomorrow, which must be, a society based on non-violence, an attainable utopia. An individual can adopt the way of life of the future the non-violent way without waiting for others. Since individuals can, whole groups of individuals can, then whole nations can. From Gandhi's intro, I hope and pray that no one will regard the advice interspersed in the following chapters as authoritative. Of his early memories of his childhood education, Gandhi noted, "My intellect must have been sluggish and my memory raw." I can relate to that. At age 7, he was so shy, he ran home as soon as school closed. His books and lessons were his sole companions. From page 15, my shyness was one of the reasons for this aloofness, which I now see was wrong. I had then had the false notion that gymnastics had nothing to do with education. Today, I know that physical training should have as much place in the curriculum as mental training. Page 24. As we know that a man often succumbs to temptation, however much he may resist it, we also know that providence often intercedes and saves him in spite of himself. How all this happens, how far a man is free, and how far a creature of circumstances, how far free will comes into play, and where fate enters on the scene, all this is a mystery and will remain a mystery. Pages 48 and 49. The choice was now made in favor of vegetarianism, the spread of which henceforth became my mission. The result of reading all this literature was that dietetic experiments came to take an important place in my life. Health was the principal consideration of these experiments to begin with, but later on, religion became the supreme motive. 53. The new arrangement combined walking and economy, as it meant a saving of fares and gave me walks of 8 or 10 miles a day. It was mainly this habit of long walks that kept me practically free from illness throughout my stay in England and gave me a fairly strong body. Besides, a knowledge of Latin means greater command over the English language. Regarding simplifying my life, I made an effort to simplify my life still further. Let not the reader think that this living made my life by any means a dreary affair. On the contrary, the change harmonized my inward and outward life. It was also more in keeping with the means of my family. My life was certainly more truthful, and my soul knew no bounds of joy. 55. Experiments in dietetics. As I searched myself deeper, the necessity for changes, both internal and external, began to grow on me. As soon as, or even before, I made alterations in my expenses and my way of living, I began to make changes in my diet. I saw that writers on vegetarianism had examined the question very minutely, attacking it in its religious, scientific, practical, and medical aspects. Ethically, they had arrived at the conclusion that man's supremacy over the lower animals meant not that the former should prey upon the latter, but that the higher should protect the lower, and that there should be a mutual aid between the two as between man and man. They had also brought out the truth that man eats not for enjoyment, but to live. And some of them accordingly suggested and effected in their lives abstention not only from flesh meat, but from eggs and milk. From page 62, I must say that beyond occasionally exposing me to laughter, my constitutional shyness has been no disadvantage whatever. In fact, I can see that, on the contrary, it has been all to my advantage. My hesitancy in speech, which was once an annoyance, is now a pleasure. Its greatest benefit has been that it has taught me the economy of words. The Gita is a sacred Hindu text. It's a philosophical dialogue. Regarding this, the book struck me as one of priceless worth. The impression has ever since been growing on me, with the result that I regard it today as the book par excellence for the knowledge of truth. From page 68, many Christians are meat eaters and drink, no doubt, but neither meat eating nor drinking is enjoined by Scripture. I could not possibly read through the Old Testament. I read the book of Genesis, and the chapters that followed invariably sent me to sleep. But just for the sake of being able to say that I had read it, I plodded through the other books with much difficulty and without the least interest or understanding. I disliked reading the book of Numbers. But the New Testament produced a different impression, especially the Sermon on the Mount, which went straight to my heart. I compared it with the Gita. Page 77. So long as we are children, we are attracted by toys, and the Eiffel Tower was a good demonstration of the fact that we are all children attracted by trinkets. Regarding Gandhi's search for a guru, page 89, the throne has remained vacant and my search still continues. An imperfect teacher may be tolerable in mundane matters, but not in spiritual matters. Only a perfect Narni deserves to be enthroned as guru. There must, therefore, be ceaseless striving after perfection, for one gets the guru that one deserves. Infinite striving for perfection is one's right. It is its own reward. Page 148. But all my life through, the very insistence on truth has taught me to appreciate the beauty of compromise. I saw in later life that this spirit was an essential part of satyagraha. It has often meant endangering my life and incurring the displeasure of friends. But truth is hard as adamant and tender as a blossom. Page 150. I had learnt at the outset not to carry on public work with borrowed money. One could rely on people's promises in most matters except in respect of money. Page 153. The heart's earnest and pure desire is always fulfilled. In my own experience, I have often seen this rule verified. Service of the poor has been my heart's desire, and it has always thrown me amongst the poor and enabled me to identify myself with them. Page 160. I made, too, an intensive study of Tolstoy's books, The Gospels in Brief, What to Do, and other books made a deep impression on me. I began to realize more and more the infinite possibilities of universal love. And from page 160. Once we began to compare the life of Jesus with that of Buddha, look at Gautama's compassion, said I. It was not confined to mankind. It was extended to all living beings. From page 167, I was confirmed in my opinion that religion and morality were synonymous. The captain had no doubt about the correctness of his opposite conviction. He drew a line between morality and faith. The teaching of the Bible was to him child's play. Its beauty lay in its simplicity. Page 204. The education of the child begins with conception. The physical and mental states of the parents at the moment of conception are reproduced in the baby. Then, during the period of pregnancy, it continues to be affected by the mother's moods, desires, and temperament, as also her ways of life. After birth, the child imitates the parents and for a considerable number of years entirely depends on them for its growth. 2:14, the extreme forms in which my passion for self-help and simplicity ultimately expressed itself will be described in their proper place. The seed had long been sown. Page 216, I cannot forbear from recording a sweet reminiscence of how human nature shows itself at its best in moments of trial. Page 218, truth is like a vast tree which yields more and more fruit the more you nurture it. The deeper the search in the mine of truth, the richer the discovery of the gems buried there in the shape of openings for an ever greater variety of service. Page 230, how heavy is the toll of sins and wrongs that wealth, power, and prestige exact from man. From page 233, one should always find some time for exercise, just as one does for one's meals. It is my humble opinion that, far from taking away from one's capacity for work, it adds to it. Page 234 and 235. On the way I saw a stream of sheep going to be sacrificed. We were greeted by rivers of blood. I have never forgotten that sight. To my mind, the life of a lamb is no less precious than that of a human being. I should be unwilling to take the life of a lamb for the sake of the human body. I hold that the more helpless a creature, the more entitled it is to protection by man from the cruelty of man. Page 242. Whatever a man sows, that shall he reap. The law of karma is inexorable and impossible of evasion. There is thus hardly any need for God to interfere. He laid down the law and, as it were, retired. Page 267. As the ideals of sacrifice and simplicity were becoming more and more realized, and the religious consciousness was becoming more and more quickened in my daily life, the passion for vegetarianism as a mission went on increasing. I have known only one way of carrying on missionary work, by personal example and discussion with searchers for knowledge. Page 269. With the growing simplicity of my life, my dislike for medicines steadily increased. Though I have had 2 serious illnesses in my life, I believe that man has little need to drug himself. 999 cases out of 1,000 can be brought round by means of a well-regulated diet, water, and earth treatment, and similar household remedies. He who runs to the doctor for every little ailment and swallows all kinds of drugs not only curtails his life, but by becoming the slave of his body instead of remaining its master, loses self-control and ceases to be a man. Page 271. A writer almost always presents one aspect of a case, whereas every case can be seen from no less than 7 points of view, all of which are probably correct by themselves, but not correct at the same time and in the same circumstances. And then many books are written with a view of gaining customers and earning name and fame. Let those, therefore, who read such books as these do so with discernment. Page 272. It is my firm conviction that man need take no milk at all beyond the mother's milk that he takes as a baby. His diet should consist of nothing but sun-baked fruits and nuts. My coworkers and I have seen by experience that there is much truth in the Indian proverb that as a man eats, so shall he become. Page 280. I am not writing the autobiography to please critics, Writing it is itself one of the experiments with truth. Page 287. The sole aim of journalism should be service. The newspaper press is a great power, but just as an unchained torrent of water submerges whole countrysides and devastates crops, even so an uncontrolled pen serves but to destroy. The useful and the useless must, like good and evil, generally go on together, and man must make his choice. Page 294. I had long made it a rule to go on a light diet during epidemics. From the teachings of Ruskin's book, Unto This Last, I understood to be, number one, that the good of the individual is contained in the good of all. Number two, that a lawyer's work has the same value as the barber's, inasmuch as all have the same right of earning their livelihood from their work. And three, that a life of labor, i.e. the life of the tiller of the soil and the handicraftsman, is the life worth living. From page 309, true beauty, after all, consists in purity of the heart. Page 312, children inherit the qualities of the parents, no less than their physical features. Environment does play an important role, but the original capital on which a child starts in life is inherited from its ancestors. I have also seen children successfully surmounting the effects of an evil inheritance. That is due to purity being an inherent attribute of the soul. Page 317. Man is man because he is capable of, and only insofar as he exercises self-restraint. At page 320, Gandhi talks of an exclusive fruit diet, and on page 321, it dawned upon me that fasting could be made as powerful a weapon of indulgence as of restraint. Page 322, in trying to cure one old disease, we give rise to 100 new ones. In trying to enjoy the pleasures of sense, we lose in the end even our capacity for enjoyment. All this is passing before our very eyes, but there are none so blind as those who will not see. I decided to live on a pure fruit diet, and that too composed of the cheapest fruit possible. Our ambition was to live the life of the poorest people. The fruit diet turned out to be very convenient also. Cooking was practically done away with. Raw, ground nuts, bananas, dates, lemons, and olive oil composed our usual diet. More from page 329. The carnal mind, instead of controlling the senses, becomes their slave. And therefore the body always needs clean, non-stimulating foods and periodical fasting. Page 339. The teacher had always to be mindful of his P's and Q's, whether he was in the midst of the children or not. It is possible for a teacher situated miles away to affect the spirit of the pupils by his way of living. It would be idle for me if I were a liar to teach boys to tell the truth. A cowardly teacher would never succeed in making his boys valiant, and a stranger to self-restraint could never teach his pupils the value of self-restraint. Page 349. When two nations are fighting, the duty of a votary of ahimsa is to stop the war. Page 276. Man and his deed are two distinct things. Whereas a good deed should call forth approbation and a wicked deed disapprobation, the doer of the deed, whether good or wicked, always deserved respect or pity as the case may be. Hate the sin and not the sinner is a precept which, though easily understood, is rarely practiced, and that is why the poison of hatred spreads in the world. It is quite proper to resist and attack a system, but to resist and attack its author is tantamount to resisting and attacking oneself. For we are all tarred with the same brush, and are children of one and the same Creator. As such, the divine powers within us are infinite. From pages 361 and 362, as a student, I had heard that the lawyer's profession was a liar's profession, but this did not influence me, as I had no intention of earning either position or money by lying. I warned every new client at the outset that he should not expect me to take up a false case or to coach the witnesses, with the result that I built up such a reputation that no false cases used to come to me. Page 386. Spiritual relationship is far more precious than physical. Physical relationship divorced from spiritual is a body without soul. Page 389. Here I saw a cow with 5 feet. I was astonished, but knowing men soon disillusioned me. The poor 5-footed cow was a sacrifice to the greed of the wicked. I learnt that the 5th foot was nothing else but a foot cut off from a live calf and grafted upon the shoulder of the cow. The result of this double cruelty was exploited to fleece the ignorant of their money. Page 396. Service without humility is selfishness and egotism. Page 412. According to the law, I was to be on my trial, but truly speaking, government was to be on its trial. The commissioner only succeeded in trapping government in the net which he had spread for me. Page 437. Experience has taught me that civility is the most difficult part of satyagraha. Civility does not here mean the mere outward gentleness of speech cultivated for the occasion, but an inborn gentleness and desire to do the opponent good. These should show themselves in every act of a satyagrahi. Page 458. But you can wake a man only if he is really asleep. No effort that you may make will produce any effect upon him if he is merely pretending to sleep. Page 469. For I have always held that it is only when one sees one's own mistakes with a convex lens and does just the reverse in the case of others that one is able to arrive at a just relative estimate of the two. Page 474. From the very start, I set my face against taking advertisements in these journals. I do not think that they have lost anything thereby. On the contrary, it is my belief that it has in no small measure helped them to maintain their independence. Page 482. It is an inalienable right of the people thus to withhold cooperation. We are therefore entitled to non-cooperate with government in case of a betrayal. Page 501. The adoption of non-cooperation was itself a great practical attempt made by the Congress to bring about Hindu-Muslim unity. Page 503 in the farewell. I set a high value on my experiments. I do not know whether I have been able to do justice to them. I can only say that I have spared no pains to give a faithful narrative, to describe truth as it appeared to me and in the exact manner in which I have arrived at it has been my ceaseless effort. The exercise has given me ineffable mental peace because it has been my fond hope that it might bring faith in truth and ahimsa to waverers. Page 504. But the path of self-purification is hard and steep. To attain to perfect purity, one has to become absolutely passion-free in thought, speech, and action, to rise above the opposing currents of love and hatred, attachment and repulsion. I know that I have not in me as yet that triple purity. In spite of constant, ceaseless striving for it, That is why the world's praise fails to move me. Indeed, it very often stings me. And from page 505, the last page. But I know that I have still before me a difficult path to traverse. I must reduce myself to zero. So long as a man does not, of his own free will, put himself last among his fellow creatures, there is no salvation for him. Ahimsa is the farthest limit of humility. Thinking back to the movie, the 1982 Gandhi film, I noticed, Gandhi had a great sense of humor. He told a reporter, "I have friends who spend a great deal of money to keep me in poverty." And a final quote from that movie, "When I despair, I remember that all through history, the way of truth and love has always won. There have been tyrants and murderers, and for a time they can seem invincible, but in the end, they always fall." Think of it, always.